Get ready, Calvary kids. This week's Bible story is the entire book of Esther. Sit back, find someone to read it to you, or go read it yourself. It's time to learn about the Bible's most famous princess. This month is all about creativity. Creativity, imagining what you could do because you are made in God's image. We've been talking a lot this month about how God has plans for you. But did you ever wonder what those plans look like? Does God's plan come wrapped like a gift that falls from the sky? Or is it an ancient scroll found in an ancient cave? The Old Testament book of Esther is where we're going to go today to find out how God's plan for your life shows up. Israel was once a prosperous kingdom, but they forgot all about God and worshipped idols instead. God warned them that if they didn't repent, He would take away their kingdom. But they didn't even believe Him. And in time, they were taken over by a country called Babylon. And then after that, Persia took over after Babylon ruled, and this is where the story of Esther takes place. Esther was an Israelite girl who was taken from Israel at a very young age. It's possible that she didn't even remember her homeland. Even though she was raised in a foreign culture that worshiped different gods, her family stayed true to the one true God of the Bible. The king of Persia, Xerxes, was a proud man that liked to always have his own way. And ancient kings always surrounded themselves with servants and advisors who all liked to have a little bit of the king's power, so they would say things to make him happy. Well, King Xerxes was having a party and he wanted to impress all his friends. So he ordered his queen to come and dance for everyone, but she refused. No, I won't do it. The Bible doesn't tell us about the relationship between Xerxes and his queen, but I can bet that she thought the idea of dancing at some party was pretty embarrassing. Well, the king wasn't having that.
You won't do what I say? Well, then you can't be queen anymore.
And just like that, he had her thrown out of the palace. That's when he started looking for a new queen. It was time for a queen contest. Calvary kids, even though there was no TV or internet back then, this contest was big news. Everyone in the country was excited because the call went out that any girl in the whole Parisian Empire could become queen. It was like one of those dancing or singing reality TV shows. You might ask, why would any girl want to be queen to such a king? Well, the answer is that back then, being a queen meant a major life improvement, and your whole family would be close to power. Many saw this as a step up. Mordecai, the much older cousin of Esther, treated her like a daughter. He was old enough to remember being kicked out of Israel and was worried about how people would treat him and Esther when they found out they were from Israel. When the king's people came to take Esther for the queen tryouts, he warned her, "Don't tell anyone who you are." As Esther stayed in the palace, she became very popular. She got to eat the best foods and wear the best clothes. But never did she tell anyone that she was a Jew from Israel. While Esther stayed in the palace, Mordecai stayed close to check on her. Once when he was living next to the palace, he overheard some men planning to kill the king. Mordecai ran to tell Esther, who ran to tell the guards. Mordecai had saved the king's life. Things were going so well for Esther that the king had chosen her to be queen. She had won the contest, and Mordecai was close to her too. At this time, there was also this guy named Haman. He was just recently promoted, and he was given special honors by the king. One of those special honors was that people had to bow down to Haman. Well, that didn't sit well with Mordecai, because he believed he should only bow down to God. So when Haman came by and everyone bowed, there was Mordecai, the only one standing. Haman was mad, really mad. Like ultimate over 9,000 mad. He wanted to know everything about this guy that refused to bow down to him. He found out his name and that he was a Jew from Israel. Haman was very embarrassed that Mordecai didn't bow down to him, and so he came up with a plan not only to make him pay, but the rest of the Jews as well. He went to the king and told him that there were these people scattered all over his territory that obeyed different laws than the rest of the Persian Empire, and were dangerous to be left alive. He made the Jews sound super scary to the king, almost as if the Jews were planning to overthrow Persia any second. The king believed him and made a law that on a certain day, all Persian citizens were allowed to kill Jews and steal their stuff. Everyone everywhere was shocked and surprised by this new law. They couldn't understand how something like this could happen so quickly and for seemingly no reason. What they didn't know is that there was someone close to the king who hated the Jews. The Jews were scared for their lives. When Mordecai found out, he acted like people do when someone dies. He wept openly and wore clothes that were a sign of grief. Esther heard about this and asked what was going on, since she had not heard about this new law. Mordecai sent word to her about the law and about how Haman had men ready for that day to come and to go out and kill as many of the Jews as they could find. She was devastated and horrified and also very scared. She was the queen. She was in a great position to do something about this law. The only problem was that she was only allowed to go to the king if he called for her. If she showed up without being called, she would be kicked out of the palace or worse. Mordecai sent word back that if this law went through, she would not escape either, in spite of being the queen. He encouraged her by saying that maybe this was the reason all along that she became queen, to save her people. Esther took courage and asked all the Jews to spend the next 3 days fasting and praying for her. She had decided to go into the king and tell him about Haman and the truth about where she came from. The day she went in to the king was tense. There was a special rule that when you come into the king, he would only welcome you if he held out his scepter. Otherwise, you were not welcomed and you could not speak. So Esther went in and stood before the king's throne. He held out his scepter. She was allowed to speak. Now you or I might think that Esther should tell the king right then, but that is not how she felt. In spite of being the queen, she did not know this man at all. She decided to throw a party and invite him. She even invited Haman too. He had no idea she was Jewish. So the king was very pleased to have a party. Haman was too, and bragged about how important he must be to be invited to a party by the queen. That day, though, he saw Mordecai refusing to bow down, so he became really angry. He was so mad, he had a giant pole built to hang Mordecai on when the day came to attack all the Jews. Esther invited them both to a second party where she planned to tell the king the truth. The night before the party, the king couldn't sleep, so he had some servants read official records to him. They read the account of how Mordecai saved his life. The king was embarrassed that he did not reward Mordecai. At that moment, Haman was coming in to ask the king if he could hang Mordecai. The king asked Haman,
What should the king do for the man he who wants to honor?
Haman, thinking the king was talking about him, went for it and asked for the best things he could think of.
I think it should be a big parade with a royal robe and people making announcements about how awesome this man is.
Why, that's a great idea, Haman. The man I want to honor is Mordecai.
What?
Yes, and since you came up with the idea, why don't you go with Mordecai and make sure he's honored?
Haman couldn't believe it, but it was true. He was forced to throw a parade for a man he hated. When he got home that day, he didn't have long to think about it because the king's men came to get him for the second party with Esther. At this party, the king asked her,
What is it that you want, my queen?
I would ask that me and my people be allowed to live. Me and my people have been sold to be destroyed. Now it may surprise you to know that the king was completely shocked. He had no idea what she was talking about, even though it was his own law. The king was very upset and asked,
What man would dare do this?
That one.
Uh-oh.
It was at the party that the king found out Esther was a Jew. Haman was shocked, but it was too late to change his mind now. The king was sad because he could not change the law, but he was able to make another one. On the day that the people are free to destroy the Jews and take their stuff, the Jews would be allowed to defend themselves. This was big news, since people aren't as likely to attack people who are armed. They were able to fight those who still wanted to hurt them. The Jews were saved! Esther and Mordecai were highly honored, and there's a special Jewish holiday in honor of Esther called Purim. Have you ever wondered about God's plans for you? For Esther, if God would have told her at the beginning, she would have never believed him. The only way to find out is by following God, since each day is full of choices for us to make to both serve and bless God. What has God given you to do today? Start there. Let's see our bottom line. God created you for a purpose. Your life means something, even when you feel like it doesn't. Your life is a story of God working. You can start finding out God's purpose for your life by spending time with him in his word, in prayer, and hanging out with other believers. Thanks for coming today. For Calvary Kids Online, this is Alexa signing off.